Hello and welcome to Face Off. On today's programme, we're going to have a close look at François Hollande 2 weeks after the routing of France's Socialist Party in local elections and the reshuffle. He has hit an all-time low in the ratings for a French president. Just 18% of those polled gave him their approval. Also, his new Prime Minister, Manuel Valls, is doing particularly well in the ratings. 58% of French voters gave him the thumbs up. It is the biggest spread between a president and his Prime Minister ever in the history of French politics. We're going to discuss it on today's programme with my guest, Jean-Marc Gonin, who writes for the Figaro magazine, one of our regular contributors. Thank you for being with us. With me as well, Philip Turl of RFI. Lovely to see you. Thank you for being with us. It's been 2 weeks, Philip Turl, already. Things are looking bad for the president, but quite good for the Prime Minister. What does that tell us about where France's government is?
Well, it's quite a bizarre situation, as you were saying before, because for the first time in the history of the Fifth Republic since 1958, we have this strange situation where the president is at the lowest possible level ever in the opinion polls at only 18%, with his prime minister riding high at almost 60%. That's a 40% gap between the two of them. And this is explained by the fact that since François Hollande became president 2 years ago, he hasn't managed to bring down unemployment. He hasn't managed to kickstart the economy, to bring back economic growth. People are dissatisfied. They say they're paying too many taxes. They say there have been too many mess-ups with the president making mistakes and making errors. And they have had enough, basically. And that led to this routing that you mentioned in the municipal elections a couple of weeks ago, and this hurried government reshuffle. And the only man who is able to take over as Prime Minister from Jean-Marc Ayrault, who was also unpopular, is Manuel Valls, the former Interior Minister, who is being deemed sort of like a left-wing version of Nicolas Sarkozy, a very speedy person who says what he thinks, who's dynamic, who has ideas, who people tend to generally appreciate. Doesn't get on terribly well with François Hollande, but he was the only man to do the job, the only popular enough government minister to be able to take the place of the unpopular Jean-Marc Ayrault.
This was the man, Jean-Marc Gonin, who was billed as the man who would breathe a new life into the presidency of François Hollande, give some hope to the French people, as Philip Turl was just saying, the man who might yet save France. He's given this speech to the French Parliament. He's given us an idea of where he wants to go. Will it be enough, do you think, what's been announced so far?
Well, he has to give more. At least for the moment, it was kind of sketch. He had a pretty short speech to the Parliament. He has to go into details, explain what the next steps will be, and the hard part will start there, I think, because the details will mean a lot of cuts in healthcare, for instance, in public expenditures altogether, and that won't be to the taste of the French people, because you will have, of course, healthcare is a very touchy issue. Plus, and that we shouldn't forget, cutting public expenditures when you have a socialist government in power means hitting your own forces, your own people, because the base of the Socialist Party are public agents, people who work for local authorities, and all these layers of French administration will be hard hit by the measures.
And there's something else which is even worse for the new Prime Minister, Manuel Valls, is that during the build up to this government reshuffle, they were saying, well, what we're going to do is we're going to pull back on taxes and try to give people a bit more leeway and make it not so hard on everyone that have more money.
Tax cuts for business, tax cuts for the least well-off.
Tax cuts right across the board. One of the big complaints against François Hollande is that people have been paying and paying and paying more taxes because they have to get the country out of its financial difficulties and back on the rails. And the new government saying, well, what we'll do is we'll go to Brussels and we'll make sure that they give us more time to pay back our debt. And what have we heard this week? We've heard that Brussels says, no, you're going to have to pay back your debt on time, because Germany is fed up with letting you have more time. We're fed up with letting you have more time. So we want 3% of GDP as the limit, and you've got to come up with that as soon as possible. for the date that was fixed.
And that was a pretty careless move from both of them.
It was a
because
very
François
careless
Hollande
move.
said it in his speech, and Valls himself in front of Parliament said also that they will ease the pressure from Brussels. They will be in the situation to do so, and they got the doors slammed into their faces. So the measures will be even harder than expected.
I don't want to be pessimistic, but I don't think that Manuel Valls is going to be able to do it anytime soon.
No one's achieved it so far.
No one's achieved it so far, and with what they've got to do, the money they've got to find to bring down these taxes, they've got to find the money somewhere where they're going to get it. They're going to cut public spending, they're going to cut healthcare, they're going to make people pay more taxes. Maybe people don't want to do that, so the popularity rating will probably come fairly fast downwards, I would think, as far as Manuel Valls is concerned. And he's the last card that François Hollande has got to play. He's the man that François Hollande is putting all his hope on. So this really is a very, very make or break situation for the French president. But they're in such dire straits, and they've got to find this money somewhere. I don't know how they're going to do it.
Part of the problem, Jean-Marc Gonin, is that the French Socialist Party, and this is its great difference with, for instance, Britain's Labour Party, has never reformed itself. So you have now a French Prime Minister who's been elected essentially because he's considered right-wing, but who still has to fend off the left of his party in almost anything he does.
Yes, they never had the conversions that the Labour Party had in Britain and the Germans long ago, more than 50 years ago in Germany. So they still have a pretty Marxist, collectivist mentality, and well, now he's on the supply side. He says the companies will create the jobs. The economic growth come from private companies and not from government, from the state, as they say. And this is, I doubt you have a majority inside Parliament. I mean, inside the Socialist Party, that really believe that sort of speech. It might sound very odd, but I think more than half of the socialist MPs don't believe in that sort of speech. So we will have an extremely difficult time trying to convince and have their votes backing him.
And it isn't even just Philippe Turle, the backbenchers. We have seen amongst this, within this reshuffle, Manuel Valls named Prime Minister, but also Arnaud Montebourg named Economy Minister.
Well, it's essentially a Hollande-type government, because you have the return of Ségolène Royal, who is the mother of François Hollande's 4 children. You have the Minister for Agriculture, Stéphane Le Foll, who's now been named government spokesman. You have other ministers like Benoît Hamon, who is also from the left of the Socialist Party, who's now the Education Minister. But François Hollande's tactics...
at the Ministry of Finance?
Minister of Finance as well. François Hollande's tactics have generally cheesed off all the left-wing part of the Socialist Party and the Greens and also the far left. So with no change in direction in sight, I think that there'll be more cleavage and more criticism coming from within the Socialist Party, which is supposed to support François Hollande, criticising what he's been doing. And if you look at what's happened in the past when you have a president ruling the country, their party normally stays behind them, although the party doesn't seem to exist in such a strong way once the leader of the party becomes president. This time round, we have a Socialist Party that's really split between those, a small faction in favour of what François Hollande's doing, another faction which is largely critical of what François Hollande is doing and becoming more and more vociferous about it as time goes on.
All this, of course, is happening at a time, Jean-Marc Gonin, when France, frankly, didn't have any time to lose in terms of the reforms that it needs to meet those requirements we were talking about from Brussels earlier.
No, they have no time. In fact, you have the pressure of Brussels, you have the debt, and you also have an incredible amount of French people who are unemployed. You need to act. And Valls, for instance, has found a new role model called Matteo Renzi. He's the new Prime Minister of Italy. And Renzi, with Italy, with a different situation, but Renzi said, within 100 days, I will reform Italy. And everybody said, good luck. These are the reforms we have been trying for 30 years. So Valls is more or less in the same situation. He didn't say the 100 days, but in fact, he doesn't have much more time in front of him than Matteo Renzi.
But the problem is, he's got to do the reforms that François Hollande imposes on him. It's not Valls who decides what he's got to do. He's following for what François Hollande has decided, and that's why he's got his hands tied.
Well, it's
back,
more or less
basically
what he believes in.
So he doesn't even have the freedom that Matteo Matteo Renzi has.
He hasn't got the freedom of Matteo Renzi. He hasn't got the availability of funds to be able to spend money on what he likes. They've said they're going to. We don't know where they're going to get the money from to bring the economy back up. He's got to have 1.5% growth to bring unemployment down. These are all a long way off. So for the time being, it's looking pretty hard going.
And with presidential elections as far off as they are, what are we looking at, Jean-Marc, now? People in the streets? What's going to happen?
Well, you might have, this country, I mean, when things get tense, you have a lot of people marching in the streets. Right after Vals's speech in front of Parliament, there was first demonstration organized by the extreme left, and was already kind of a success. I mean, they managed to mobilize a lot of people. Imagine when you have, within a few months, healthcare cuts, plus, you will have a lot of people. So both men will be tested. That odd couple, Valls and Hollande, will have to resist the pressure of the street. I'm sure this will be the moment of truth for François Hollande's mandate.
And so to begin, Philip Churl, finally and very briefly, to end where we began with this 18%, it could be then that François Hollande falls even lower.
Well, I think what we're going to see is quite an interesting situation. Before, when Jean-Marc Ayrault was Prime Minister, there was no competition between the two men. Ayrault had made it clear that he had no ambitions to become president. This time round, it's well known that Manuel Valls would like to be president of France, and why not in 2017? But François Hollande would also like to be re-elected in 2017, so we might see some kind of clash coming between the two men, with Valls being terribly popular and Hollande being very unpopular, and both of them trying to fight their way forward to the primaries of the Socialist Party for election in 2017. It'll be very interesting to observe how the attitude between the two men evolves,
even as they try and sort out France. Thank you very much indeed, Philip Churl, Jean-Marc Gonnet, for having been with us today. Fascinating times ahead, so watch this space. We'll be back, of course, every week for a regular look at what's been going on in the French political scene. Do join us next week. Goodbye for now.